because I believe Tom Perriello is the only candidate for governor bold enough to stand up to the hate and division coming out of Washington and Richmond. As an Iranian American, someone who fled war and turmoil and was undocumented for many years, I came to America with a dream and a belief that anything is possible. It's a story shared by most immigrants and refugees, and it's one under threat by Republicans and President Trump. When this administration is trying to ban my own family from visiting me and tearing families apart and instilling fear in our immigrant communities across our state and country, Tom has been there on the front lines with us, resisting these discriminatory policies, whether it's protesting in the streets, during the Women's March, or at Dulles Airport, joining activists to oppose Trump's unconscionable refugee and Muslim ban, or whether it's been out there with the resistance on Capitol Hill in defense of the ACA. As we've seen, the resistance is working, and Tom has been there with us every single step of the way. Tom and Zita took a courageous vote while in Congress in defense of Obamacare as a Democrat representing a red district. He'll tell you that this vote on Obamacare was the proudest vote he took as a member of Congress. And in voting to pass the ACA, he made a long-term bet that it would save lives, well worth the short-term political cost, and vigorously defended it. He lost his congressional seat because of that vote, but he doesn't regret it one single bit. He's receptive and responsive to the grassroots. He doesn't simply show up at a rally for a photo op and call it a day. I'm proud to call Tom a friend and a fighter for all of our communities. This is who we need as our next governor. Someone who will be fighting for all Virginians every single day as governor.
Trump administration. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Yasmin, for that incredible introduction. And thank you for being a civil rights hero fighting every day to ensure the dignity and security of every one of our neighbors. Thank you, Yasmin, so much. For sharing that story about his family's experience with the Affordable Care Act. It's a powerful reminder. As I'll talk about, I think while the size of the resistance has changed so much, it's stories that have been able to break through. So all of those who stood up in recent months to tell the stories, whether it's of refugee communities that they know or their experiences with the ACA, all I can tell you is your stories are making a difference. Thank you, Jonathan. I also want to give a quick shout out to Ryan Sawyers, chair of the Prince William School Board, who's been standing up for trans teens and the LGBT community. Education and economic opportunity. And I want to thank George Mason University for having us here tonight. And all the George Mason students here tonight, including some students organizing a canvas for our campaign this weekend. You've been taking on the Koch brothers right here in Virginia. I just want to also thank all of you for being here to support our campaign and to continue the fight against inequality and corruption right here in Virginia. With so many things that we care deeply about under threat, our values and our neighbors, it's important for us to remember tonight that the resistance is working. Because of so many of you, Virginia was the only southern state to defeat Donald Trump in November. Values. Those who joined protests at Dulles Airport to say that we will stand with the refugees against a bullier-in-chief who wakes up each morning trying to decide which vulnerable group he wants to pick on today. But the resistance has said, not us, not here. We will stand with our neighbors and we will be an inclusive Virginia. November, we will be the first statewide signal of the Trump era to say that compassion and fairness will win out against hate and bigotry in Virginia and then around the country in 2018. There are real reasons to be hopeful about the resistance that has begun in recent months, but unfortunately we must remain vigilant. Each day, we see executive orders rolling back progress to protect trans teens. We see executive orders rolling back progress on climate. I met recently with interfaith leaders in Northern Virginia from the Catholic and Muslim community who had been sharing best practices about parents in their houses of worship, who've prepared binders about their children, their allergies, their tutors, their school schedules, so that if the parents disappear in the middle of the night, someone else in the parish will take the booklet and take care of the kids. In 2017 in Virginia, this is the kind of fear that many of our brothers and sisters across the state must feel. So we will remain vigilant because we will not let this intimidation and hate stand. We will keep Virginia an inclusive, beloved, and loving state here in Virginia. message I have tonight. Resistance is not enough. We must continue to stand for a positive vision. It's called evidence. Concentrated more in the hands of the few and made it harder and harder to make it into the middle class in Virginia and around the country. These are the same folks who've told us that somehow raising the minimum wage kills jobs and crushes small business. Again, there's only one problem: evidence. The workers a living wage is not just the right thing to do for workers. It puts more money in the pockets of the working and middle class that they spend locally, that creates growth for small business in our communities. My likely Republican opponent, Ed Gillespie, in November, is one of the great architects of trickle-down economics and spent 8 years as George W. Bush's right hand promoting this lie that if we just did a few more rounds of tax cuts for the biggest companies, it would trickle down like crumbs to the rest of the country in Virginia. It is time for us to drive a stake through the heart of this lie of trickle-down economics and start building growth from the bottom up, which we know works here in Virginia. But I must say, as someone born and raised in Charlottesville, it bothers me. Great stuff about Charlottesville. It bothers me, though, that the minimum wage in Virginia is less than that in West Virginia. $7.25 an hour.
That's a crap.
We've been doing a set of meetings with airport workers who work a full-time job and make $14,000 a year.
Our rate is $1,500.
The opportunity we have when we see someone work a full-time job so often is that their next step is to take a nap where they are for an hour, because they then have to start a second full-time job to be able to afford to raise kids here in Northern Virginia. When I was talking to one of these workers recently and I asked her what she would like from her next Virginia governor, she said, "I'd like to see my kids awake once a week. If I made a little bit more per hour, I could shave back those hours and see my kids awake." Now, this young woman is not going to vote for the Republican Party. The question is whether she's going to vote. And we need to start making sure that we have a Democratic Party and a governor platform that says to her it's worth 45 minutes out of her 85-hour work week to vote for us. Against 2 gas-fracked pipelines that have been proposed across Virginia. When we came out, the pundits said this doesn't make any sense, this is already a done deal, there's not even any legal authority to do this. But we researched it, and on my way over here 2 hours ago, we got the news. The state of Virginia is now going to do a clean water review about these 2 gas-fracked pipelines. And make 2 years of trade school or community college free for everyone in Virginia. For all of our progress for decades, Virginia has been stuck with one of the most regressive and and repressive criminal codes in the entire country. It is time to break the school-to-prison pipeline. Virginia has had voter suppression laws to target the African American community. I believe Virginia should become the first state in the country to have 100% voter participation. Since 2010, our gerrymandered legislature has introduced 75 bills restricting a woman's right to choose here in Virginia. For a woman's right to choose, we must protect a woman's right to choose, but also increase access and affordability so that right is meaningful here. In a state of high education and high technology, we should not be dead last on clean energy and renewable energy here in Virginia. Virginia at the forefront of a clean energy economy that protects our environment and creates the clean energy industries in the next generation. So if you believe, like I do, that it's up to us to decide what's possible, not the pundits, join with us in this campaign. Join with us on June 13th to say we can make a living wage possible here in Virginia. We can make paid medical leave possible here in Virginia. We can take the burden of student debt off of students here in Virginia. We can create clean energy jobs and give small business a shot against the big monopolies here in Virginia. If you join with us in this campaign, if you push us to be stronger in this campaign, I believe we can do something bigger than win the governorship in November. I believe we can redefine the political landscape of Virginia for a generation here in Virginia. In our campaign, we will continue to set the standard of fierce resistance against the hate and bigotry of the Trump administration, but also a positive vision that can make Virginia greater than it's ever been.
That's right.
This is my pledge to you. And tonight, it is my great honor to introduce someone who has already expanded our sense of what's possible here across the United States. A leader of a movement against inequality and corruption who is at the front lines of opposing Trump, but also opposing a narrow sense of what's possible in our healthcare system and in our economy today. Someone who has not just been able to champion that voice in the halls of the Senate, but in communities across the country. Who recently showed leadership in going to our neighbors in West Virginia to shine a light on the economic devastation of so many communities, including the spreading of the opioid epidemic. Here in Virginia, 3 Virginians die every day from the opioid epidemic. I was recently out at a clinic with a mother of a 6th grade boy. And that 6th grade boy has had 14 classmates this year die from the opioid epidemic. If we as progressives are not present where there is human suffering with the moral urgency to address it, then we are not living up to our own values. Senator Sanders has helped shine a light on the opioid epidemic, the role that Big Pharma has played in creating this epidemic, and the need for us to treat addiction as a public health crisis, not a criminal crisis. That is the kind of leadership that we have seen from Senator Sanders on issues from inequality to addiction. It is my honor have his support in this campaign. Let me introduce to you the great senator from the state of Vermont, Bernie Sanders.
Not one job, they're working 2 jobs, they are working 3 jobs. In the state of Virginia, and this is hard to believe because we have done better in Vermont, that you still have a minimum wage, a starvation minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is totally unacceptable. Our job, and I know Tom will lead this effort, is to raise that starvation minimum wage to $15 an hour, a living wage. Let me tell you a secret that you're not going to see often on TV, and you're not going to hear most politicians talking about it. In the history of the world. Now, if we were a poor country, and God knows there are many poor countries around the world, and somebody in that country said, look, we need more doctors so we can provide health care to all people. We need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need to make our colleges and universities tuition-free. Somebody would say, but you can't do it. We're a poor country. We just don't have enough wealth. That is not the case in America. Never, ever forget, you are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. There is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Now, the problem is that in that extraordinarily wealthy country, and Tom is one of the few politicians around who will talk about it. In the midst of this incredibly wealthy country, we have an obscene and grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. Tom made a good point that as we strive to a more economically just society, it is good for everybody when we put more money into the hands of working people. He's right. But there is a deep moral issue which we have got to address as well. As a people, do we believe the United States is about having the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% owning almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%? No! You are damn right. And all of the increase in worker productivity, a majority of workers in this country still do not have a 40-hour week. Today in America, not only do we have massive inequality in terms of wealth distribution, today 52% of all new income generated is going to the top 1%. In other words, mom is out working, dad is out working, kids are out working, and 52% of all new income is going to the top 1%. And this becomes not only a moral crisis, it becomes not only an economic crisis, but it also becomes a political crisis because the people on top, the people with the wealth, are not putting their money under their mattresses. People like the Koch brothers, who I understand have some influence right here, they are spending, one family, second wealthiest family in America, are spending hundreds of millions of dollars because of a corrupt campaign finance system made worse by Citizens United. So that right now, what elections are increasingly about, and I know that Tom will be up against that here in Virginia, is it is not one person, one vote. Look, we have differences with ourselves, we differ with other people. One person, one vote. Argue it out. But in America, elections should not be about billionaires buying them. For the last 37 years, under Republican and Democratic leadership, middle class has shrunk. Almost all wealth, income going to the people on top, and 43 million Americans today living in poverty, some in dismal poverty. I was in Iowa last year and I heard something that I'll never forget. Talked to a guy who worked at an emergency food shelter where they give out food for people who need that food. And I asked him, I'm kind of curious, what percentage of the people who go to that emergency food shelf in order to buy groceries to feed their kids, what percentage of them work, or most of them unemployed, or what else? He said 90% of the people who walk into the shelf are working, but they can't make it on the wages they receive. So our job, economically, our job politically, is not a radical goal. It is to create a government that works for all of us, not just the wealthy and the powerful and the wealthy. Get your hands dirty and get into this fight. Or I worry very much about the future for your kids and your grandchildren. Right now, because of a shrinking middle class, your generation, the young people's generation today, has the dubious distinction of being the first generation in the modern history of this country which will likely have a lower standard of living than your parents. We have got to put a stop to that trend. We got to tell Trump and his billionaire friends and corporate America they cannot have it all. The economy must work for every American. Type of Republican. I'm going to stand up for the working class of this country. That is what he said. Let's look at what he did. Trump said, I am going to provide good quality health care for everybody. Well, not quite, because the proposal that he supported, that thank God together we defeated, after he tells the American people he's for health care for everybody, that proposal would have thrown 24 million people off of health insurance, cut Medicaid by over $800 billion, significantly raised premiums, significantly for older workers, and told 2.5 million women that they could no longer have access to Planned Parenthood. He said one thing, he did something else. He said, I am going to drain the swamp. We're going to get the special interest out of D.C. Well, funny way of draining the swamp. He brought half of Goldman Sachs into his administration. He said he's going to stand up for working people. He proposes a budget that would increase over the next 2 years military spending by $80 billion, while he makes major cuts in education, healthcare, environmental protection. Can you imagine a billionaire president fighting for tax breaks for the rich and then cutting back on after-school programs for kids? The Meals on Wheels program for seniors? I can tell you in Vermont, and I'm sure in Virginia, you got low-income senior citizens who get one decent hot meal a day. It comes from Meals on Wheels. And these people want to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 1%, and then they want to cut Meals on Wheels. What kind of moral compass is that? Now, our job, and Tom made a very important point, it's not good enough just to beat up on Trump. That is a very easy target, I might say. But our job together is to move this nation and this state, my state, in a very different direction.
Yes, sir.
How many of you know how many major countries there are in this planet today who do not guarantee health care to all people as a right? Anyone know? Good. I want you to think about it. This is the wealthiest nation in the world. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They've got health care for all people. You go throughout Europe, whether it's the UK, France, Germany, health care for all, Scandinavia, health care for all. And by the way, in every instance, they spend significantly less per capita on health care than we do. We are the only nation on earth not to guarantee health care for all. We have got to change that. Who are staying at jobs they do not like, but they're staying there for one reason. You know what that reason is? That's right, they get health care for their families. I think that's absurd. When we have health care for all, people will be able to do the work, start the businesses, go to the jobs they really want, and not worry about whether or not they have. To raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour, we have got to fight for pay equity for women. There is no reason that women today are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. That has got to end in Virginia, Vermont, and in every state in this country. Tom understands, I understand, and you understand that this country does not survive economically unless in a very competitive global economy we have the best educated workforce in the world. There was once a time, not too many decades ago, when the United States of America had the highest percentage of college graduates of any country on earth. Today, among younger people, we are shamefully in 11th place. Today in America, there are hundreds of thousands of bright young people who want to go to college, who have the ability to go to college, but can't go to college because their families lack the income. And there are millions, including people in this room, who are leaving school $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 in debt. Our job is to encourage people to get the best education they can, not punish them for getting the best education. To make community colleges here in Virginia tuition free. And why I am going to fight to make every public college and university in this country tuition free. We're going to substantially cut student debt. I don't want people to be paying that debt for decades. Never forget, I was in Nevada. Guy 55 years old says, you know, I'm more deeply in debt now than when I left college. And I am worried, he said, that they're going to garnish my Social Security benefits in order to pay back that student debt. That is insane. All right, so we're going to do our best to lift that burden off of the shoulders of millions of Americans. And people say, and this is an important way, say, well, Bernie, that's an expensive proposition. It is. How are you going to pay for it? Well, I'll tell you how we're going to pay for it. We're going to put a tax on Wall Street speculation. Frankly, an international embarrassment that we have a president today and an administration that believes that climate change is a hoax. Tom and I and you understand that not only is climate change not a hoax, it is the great environmental crisis we face in our nation and around the world. And that is why Tom is prepared to take on powerful special interests here in Virginia to begin the process. Of transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies like wind, solar, and geothermal. We are going to create millions of decent paying jobs. Tom told you about meeting some people here in Virginia who are scared to death about Trump's immigration proposals. Same thing in Vermont, same thing all over this country. Here's the simple truth. We have 11 million undocumented people in this country, the vast majority of whom are honest, hard-working people trying to raise their kids with dignity and respect. Our job together, this is not what I want, this is what the American people want. We have got to move to a comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. Tom talked about the crisis in our criminal justice system. And let me say a word about that. Some of you may not know this, but in the United States of America today, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. China, a communist authoritarian country, has fewer people in jail than we do. And those people are disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native Americans. What I believe and what Tom believes is that it makes a lot more sense for us to invest in jobs and education for our kids rather than jails and history of our country. We are very proud of the enormous achievements that we have made as a nation, that in many respects the world looks to us for so many good reasons. But we also know that there's a part of our history which is not so positive. We know what the first immigrants did who came to this country, which was then controlled and populated by Native American people. And we know what those immigrants did to those Native American people. And to too large a degree, I should tell you, we are still doing that today. Today I just had the opportunity to chat with a fellow who's head of the Indian Health Service. Situation is not good for Native Americans today, and it has been worse in the past. You all know, we don't have to go into it at great length, what slavery meant to this country, what segregation and racism meant throughout our history. All of you know that 100 years ago today, women in America, they weren't running for president. They didn't have the right to vote. You think they were going to colleges and universities with very few exceptions? They weren't. Think they were going out and getting good jobs that they wanted to do? They weren't. Women were second-class citizens. But what happened is women stood up and they said, you know what? We're tired of it. We do not wish to continue being second-class citizens. We want first-class status. We're going to fight for it, and they have made huge progress. All right? Do we still have a long way to go in fighting sexism? We sure do. But women have stood up and fought back, and we have made real progress. Think about the civil rights movement. And you think about all of the struggles, and believe me, it wasn't only the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was people whose names you don't know, who were lynched, who were beaten, who were jailed for the crime of demanding an end to segregation, an end to racism, to allow African Americans the radical right to vote. A right, by the way, which my Republican colleagues are trying to take away today. And then we know about the struggles of the workers' movement in this country. We know 100, 150 years ago, kids who were 12 years of age were working in factories, losing their fingers. But workers stood up and demanded that working people be treated with dignity and they be allowed to form unions. We know about the struggles of the gay community. If we were here 20 years ago and somebody said, you know, Bernie, I think that gay marriage will be legal in every state in this country, people would have thought you were crazy. But the gay community and their straight allies worked together. They stood up against incredible intolerance. People were beaten, humiliated, spat upon. They stood up and they fought back and they said that in America, people will have the right to love anyone they want, regardless of gender. Asians who came to this country, built the Transcontinental Railroad. We think about the prejudice against the Catholics, the Italians, and the Irish, and the Jews. And I say all of that to tell you that as a nation, we struggled with every form of discrimination you could possibly think of, and then some. All right? We struggled. And our message to Donald Trump, as loudly and as clearly as we can say it, is President Trump, We are not going backwards. You're not going to divide us up. What they do is try to divide us up, and they tell us that our enemy is some guy picking strawberries making $9 an hour. He is not our enemy. We have got to stand together as a nation and take on the big money interests whose greed has done so much to destroy the middle class. Here in Virginia will not be just a victory for the people of Virginia. Tom's victory will be a signal all across this country. If we are not a nation, we will not be a nation that gives tax breaks to billionaires, that scapegoats minorities and cuts programs for working people and poor people and the sick. Tom's victory will show that America's moral compass is pointing in a very different direction. The underdog in this election. Let me say this without a shadow of doubt, no doubt about it at all, is that if you and young people and working people get involved in this campaign, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money the billionaires put on TV ads against Tom. It doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, what is most important is people-to-people contact. If you're out knocking on doors, if you're out getting your friends involved in the political process, registering people to vote, talking to people, explaining to people what's going on in the state and in this country, I have not a shadow of a doubt that Tom Perriello will win this election. We can defeat Trump and we can defeat a right-wing trickle-down economic theory. So there is a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. You are in the process of making history. You are in the process, by getting involved in this campaign, of not only transforming this state, but helping to transform this country. Now, I understand that here, your name for your teams are Patriots, is that right? George Mason Patriots. Well, tonight, in the deepest sense, I'm asking you to live up to that title. I'm asking you to be patriots. I'm asking you to love your country, to love your state. I'm asking you to stand up for social, economic, racial, and environmental